Daily Thetha family, today we are speaking about something that is very close to my heart as a black person in South Africa. Maybe as a media broadcaster, it might be unprofessional for me to have a view on an issue. But as a young African man that lives in a post-apartheid South Africa, and the question that we are asking is, should the people who benefited from apartheid pay back the money? Now, when we say apartheid money be paid back, we are talking about the money that the system of apartheid and the individuals that were the beneficiary thereof, unfortunately, the white population of South Africa, apartheid benefited the white minority of this particular country. We can make you a couple of examples. One, if you look at the mining sector, our forefathers, our mothers, and their families are dispossessed from their land, violently taken out of their land. And at the same time, our fathers are taken from our homes, they are forced into mines where they are working in very dangerous conditions, where most of them are dying or most of them are falling sick. At the same time, they are facing abuse from a repressive system. And many of them, thousands of African men have died up until so far working in the mines. Now, if you look in the business sector, black people are not allowed to trade in the business sector so that the white population can amass wealth. And at the same time, when it comes to the people that work for the same white people to gather that wealth, they were underpaid, they were abused, they were exploited. Most of us are celebrating, hey, the molo they are popping up. The reason why we are only seeing malls and townships now was because black people themselves were not allowed to own businesses in areas that they lived in. If you look at overseas, in America, Germany, Israel, these people are still getting reparations for World War I and World War II because the people who started the war recognized that we victimized these people. Therefore, after the war or after this tragedy, we need to be able to enable them to move further. We are pushed into a democracy that doesn't benefit us as black people, and the only thing that we got from the people that stole money, land, the sea, and the air was a sorry.
Dumelang ra la amogela ena ke Daily Thetha on SABC 1. Natalibitso ke na Nicolette wa ga Mashile ngwana wa kwa Bushbuckridge Mapolaneng. Le khona re lebella taba ya tšhelete e nyamaleleng during the apartheid times. We are asking the question gore na ga botse tšhelete yon e kae, and where are these companies and countries that were actually enriched by South African resources? Now we know gore during the apartheid times, ge motho a nagana apartheid, they think of the crimes against humanity, but nobody ever talks about the economic crimes that took place during apartheid. Now another situation is the fact that we know about countries that have had global sanctions on them, the likes of Zimbabwe, that have deteriorated during those times. But somehow the South African government during the apartheid times did not deteriorate. As a matter of fact, they managed to systematically put in a regime that has crippled many black South Africans. And that is the question on Daily Thetha. All those companies and all those families that got rich during the apartheid time, is it not time for them to start paying back?
Salmonani kamala mukini wa Shandu joba zeshil Nicolette namhlanje sikhuluma about ama companies lapha nifitha kakhulu ngesikhathi sobandlulo ukuthi wona enza njani kanti otolika ngolimi lezandla usisi Fortune Mandlala okuzobe yena uzostekelekela nje uhlelo lonke. Nanso into esibuzayo njengamanje ukuthi ama companies lapha benefitayo kakhulukazi ngesikhathi sobandlulo kumele si romanticize in the issue ukuthi they need to pay back the money. We've seen abantu abaningi bebuka state capture, but there was a lot of things that happened before kuze kube 94. Kumele sidlule ngiyona singakwazi ukuthi sikhulume or kumele sibuyele emuva siqale khona and bazoyikhokha kanjani le mali as well. Contributor as well now ke Facebook or usifonele ku 0113391315 sithi umbono wakho uthini about uhlelo namhlanje. Otherwise as welcome anywhere in studio as well as at home. Welcome to Daily Thetha. On your side,
yes, Kini, I think we'll start on my side. Let's start this conversation at the beginning of it. Solomon, South Africa, the youth of South Africa, do they even know about the economic crimes that have happened during apartheid times, and do they actually care?
Salmonani, ikamam nuvuyiseka buyethembisa. Youth of South Africa, they know about the crime ne. Ngombono wami ne. In South Africa, the way ingakhona imfuna ukuthi i-crime njengoba ikhona bona laba abangazange babhadala imali ne baphenye because nabo bakhona because now sivotile still nabo bakhona ukuze i-crime ingasaqhubeki. We must start go back and find out babuyisa imali yethu back because now we are suffering. Some of us who are still we are the victim of our parents. Even today the most of youth asebenzi asina next like my situation. I've graduated long time ago, but that time like let me do an example of NSFAS. I-government that time thina zange sayithola imali ukuthi siye ema-university siyenze the way kwenziwa ngakhona. So thina sa-affecteka kakhulu. So this thing yokuze nje iphele from laba basemuva fanele ukuthi iphenywe kubone ukuthi bayibuyisa njani manje.
All right, it's very interesting, Kini, because sometimes when we look at corruption, we always think that corruption has a black face.
Exactly.
So I think that's also something that we need to be tackling as the youth of South Africa.
If you look at a legacy, apartheid, Asian black tax, and abanye bethu, they can't even do anything in Njengoba siphila isikhathi zamanje. You need to support even abomzala, cousins, ekhaya, almost everything. But abanye abantu bathi asidluleni lapho asiqhubekeleni phambili. Vukile, I want to find out from you ukuthi do you think companies lezi zabenefita kakhulukazi ngesikhathi sobandlululo kumele zikhokhe le mali, and zikhokha kanjani?
Kumele zikhokha khona.
Yep.
And like I said kwasekuqaleni ukuthi education is very important.
Yeah.
Because asizama ukupika a fight to anybody.
Yeah.
But let everybody understand what happened. For instance, if you talk about a white youth here today, it might be like unfair if nzoti kokimali, which you do not know what happened. If we educate each other, we could know, look, this is what happened in the past.
No, let's come on your side, Nicolette, Sibuga as well. We
always talk about land being a direct consequence of, economic crimes. But this issue of black tax, Oliver, let's talk a little bit about it. Is there a direct connection between what has happened in the past, especially in terms of economic issues, and what we are experiencing today in terms of black tax?
Right, so the normal trajectory of life would be ideally for you to go to school, graduate, either start a business or get a job and become economically active. Once you become economically active, you begin your life. Unfortunately, due to our history, if you're black, in many instances, you have to begin your family's life. That's to say, you have to send your siblings to school. During the scourge of HIV and AIDS, during 2003 to 2006 we lost so many people that most of Gugulethu turned into child-headed households, right? So there's the absence of parents in that instance, and you need to start caregiving for those homes. So your cousins become the responsibility of you. Your cousins' cousins become the responsibility of you. And it's not just about we often bastardize black tax as this thing where your family is greedy and just wants to not have you live your own life. No, it's really your family having sacrificed so much for you that their only hope of economic emancipation is through you. That's to say, getting them proper sanitation, proper housing, because the government can't get to everyone, getting them proper education, and that's the scourge of black tax.
All right. I just want to quickly ask a question. The apartheid design, systematically, was it purposely designed in that manner so that it creates this a division between black and white in terms of economic inclusion?
Of course, and that class analysis, I'm Patrick Bond, I teach at WITS, the class analysis is very appropriate because it was capitalism that nurtured this rural to urban migration, where women in the rural areas had to do exactly that reproduction of the household. And normally a state would give you a creche, a state would give you child education, a state would give you a pension, a medical, but not under apartheid. It was the companies avoiding their taxes and letting the women do it. So capitalism needed, racism and sexism and ecological destruction to make super profits. And we didn't get rid of migrant labor after apartheid. It's still, you saw Marikana, it's still absolutely rooted in the way capital accumulation works. It's a tragedy. It requires this generation, as you were doing, to stand up, to talk about it, to crank up the volume, to protest the way the kids did. They were able yesterday to get fees must fall, 57 billion. That's a little less on the black tax to at least have that done. And that only comes like the free AIDS medicines through protest.
All right. I think that's the conversation that we're going to be having today. This word state capture, state capture, because it seems as if it just came with former President Jacob Zuma. Like a state capture. It didn't just get stolen only now.
And then you definitely say as well with why the topic, if I'm sensitive to talk about, why are we not talking about the apartheid money? Is it because we're going to discourage our investors to invest in this country, or who are abantu abakwazi ukuthi control the media and the platforms esokwazi ukuthi sikhulume ngayo? Some say breaking siyabuya sikhuluma ne conversation yethu apartheid money. Welcome back to Daily Thetha. Namhlanje sikhuluma about apartheid money nanokuthi kumele ibuye kanjani le mali kuthina njengabantu abamnyama. Do our guest REYNOLD as well as Oliver Dickson. Guys, welcome to Daily Thetha. Let me throw something at you, Oliver. Before say breaking, why is it now and again we don't want to discuss our topics afana nalawo, or it's very much sensitive, and some even throwing things and saying it will discourage our investors to actually come and invest in South Africa if we start having a conversation.
Right. It's not that we're not talking about it, because I certainly think we are talking about it. It's just that the people who should be talking about it aren't. So you and I can talk about it, but the only political power you and I have is the vote, right? There are people who have legislative political power who aren't talking about it, and that's where the problem begins. If you look at the composition of our parliament, right, you can't expect much of that conversation to happen with the parliamentary caucus of the Democratic Alliance, where 75% of that parliamentary caucus is white male, right? But neither can you expect the ANC to talk much about it, because if you look at the composition of the ANC, not just as a parliamentary caucus, but as an organization, is that many of them began their trajectory to wealth through these companies. So if you look at who's sitting on the boards of many private companies, who hold shares in many of these companies, so we'll name a few. Old Mutual is one of them. Steinhoff is actually a good example.
Okay. Let's get away from just naming.
Right. But if you look at who's involved in the wealth generation of those companies, it's exactly people with political power stronger than yours and I's. And so that's why the conversation is not happening at a legislative political level. And I think you and I can talk about it, but if we're not going to protest about it, if we're not going to vote for a party, or at least if we're not going to vote in the direction where that conversation really happens in a substantial way, then nothing's going to change about it.
All right. Mr. De Beer, we talk about corruption in this country, and it always has a black face somehow, you know, and when it is the other, you know, face, we never see the actual face. Let's talk a little bit about this apartheid money. Where is the money? Who has benefited from the money?
Definitely not me.
You're one of us.
But unfortunately, that is the problem, that many of the white people today, I think they sort of engage in ostrich tactics. They rather want to shove their heads in a hole and think that everything will get better. But the fact of the matter is that we had 24 years of democracy in the country. Most white people expected a drastic economic change in 1994. We were ready for it. But suddenly, all these Rainbow Nation rhetoric and everything came in.
So wait, just to jump in there, what was the expectation?
The expectation was that, from a white person's perspective, was that there's going to be big change.
Yes.
We most probably have to share our land. We most probably have to share our businesses. So the white people expected that.
Yes.
That is why we started erecting these large palisade fences and everything, because we basically expected to be part of a Uhuru coming.
Yes.
So unfortunately, it never materialized. So we sort of went slack, and unfortunately, now the problem is that apartheid, many people don't realize this, but apartheid has got two faces.
Okay.
The one side, it was a system where black people and other non-white people were prevented to integrate with white people.
Yes.
But the other side was that white people were also prevented to integrate with black people.
Yes.
And unfortunately, where are the white people staying in townships today? You don't see that.
Exactly.
So we never had the opportunity through the system of 24 years to take our money and put it in the townships. There wasn't. So but let.
No, I hear, because I wanna bring in Dr. Snaba on this one, because we're talking about. There was a tweet last year where Helen Zille tweeted that we are somehow insinuating that we should be grateful for apartheid because they built us the roads and some schools as well. Should we be like grateful for what apartheid government did to us?
I don't know if I'd be grateful for putting black people down. Okay, one. Two, all the resources within the jurisdiction of this country belongs to all the inhabitants thereof. And I personally think Uguti Zulu's tweet was unfortunate in every respect, disingenuous to say the least, looking into the discourse in the country and looking at the historical context of this country and what apartheid did. I mean, there's nothing exceptionally wow about apartheid. I mean, look at the scourge of spatial planning in society. It's still quite rife. I mean, umuntu Soweto who works in Sandton that has to wake up at 5 o'clock to get to work. It's just 3 hours to get to work. So I mean, how can it be? How can it be? So I think Uhele needs to check racism in place. I'll bet she preaches Guti. She has embraced the Rainbow Nation, which was shoved down our throats, by the way, because this narrative of a Rainbow Nation is a facade of the highest order.
Oliver, Mr. De Beer here speaks about basically, in my understanding of the picture, basically in 1994 we started singing Kumbaya with everybody and everything was all right, right? Now, and I'm glad that Dr. Patrick Bondier, who has worked in Nelson Mandela's office, is here today to actually explain to us what did President Nelson Mandela actually do and what was the expectation of that. But let's talk a little bit about, you know, now the fact that he says that the white people didn't have an opportunity to get integrated. Are we then saying that white people kept their privilege and it's going to be like that forever and ever? This money is not going to come back. We're not going to get a TRC of economic crimes.
Not that white people weren't given the opportunity. The opportunity always existed. They just weren't willing to.
Okay.
And that's what capital does to you, right?
Yes.
Capital, we're not working on a trust willingness basis here. We're working on a legislative, we have to take from you if you don't want to give basis here. And unfortunately, you know, Nelson Mandela, not to say they sold out in CODESA because they were negotiating under very difficult conditions there, but they made certain compromises, concessions and sacrifices in CODESA that weren't necessary at all. One that we live with today. And I think one of the biggest problems is that Nelson Mandela started running a country with the budget of a spaza shop.
Of course,
so you know, he had to borrow. So if we look 15 years ago, our debt to GDP ratio was sitting at 28%. That was under Thabo Mbeki's, early under Thabo Mbeki's administration. Today we're sitting with a debt to GDP ratio north of 50%. That means from every 1 rand that circulates in this country, 50 cents of that will leave the country as a form of servicing debt, right? And it means that half of our money is just leaving, not to buy things or to make nice, but just to service debt.
Who are we paying?
Right. The IMF, one of those, the World Bank, certain loan institutions that we're paying. And you know, oftentimes, and that's not the only money leaving the country, right? There's also money from the mines leaving the country. There's money from manufacturers leaving the country. And so the problem is that, you know, the apartheid debt and the apartheid economic crime didn't end. It's perpetual. It goes on till today, where people are able to hide money in offshore accounts, money that they've accumulated under apartheid, money that they're able to use today to protect themselves. So if you go look at private security in this country today, there's more private security guard than police officers in this country. And that's as a direct result of apartheid money being able to accumulate and perpetuate throughout democracy.
If you look at the legacy of apartheid to us black people, we always talk about your black tax and everything, but let's come to you, Reynolds. What is the legacy of apartheid to you as a white person?
It's definitely the worst period in our history of our country. I think that when you walk in the streets and you stand in the queue at the shop, you basically see that you don't see racism at all. Do you? No. You see that white people talk to the till operator. It's a nice get together, but unfortunately, there are many white people who the majority. I don't want to say that it's the majority of white people do want to integrate and do want to make a difference, but unfortunately, you've got these white monopoly capital. That's a name that is very commonly used.
Mr. De Beer, we really want to hear what you want to say, so we're going to just go to a quick ad break, and we'll come back and pick up from there. Guys, we have to go to a quick ad break, but we are talking about apartheid money. Please do stay with us after the break. Welcome back to Daily Thetha. You know, it's quite interesting, and sometimes it's a sentiment that when you see a white beggar, we always say, why didn't he loot like his friends during the times? So there is that sentiment that there was some sort of looting that actually happened. Yeah. But we're joined on the couch by ALFRED TSHABALALA, who is from Right to Know. You're also part of the Tribunal Against Economic Crimes. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Mr. De Beer, just before we went for an ad break, you're talking a little bit about white capitalism. I'm very curious to hear, as Kini had asked, you know, from your perspective as a white person, you know, so if you can just give us a bit of that.
Yes. Well, the vast majority of white people, they are not rich. It's only a small percentage that one can consider to be rich, and they are filthy rich. So now, unfortunately, you are sitting with this position that throughout the apartheid years, and I don't want to mention names, of course, but we knew who the rich guys were.
Okay.
But unfortunately, we must realize now as white people that we have also been deceived. We didn't get any part of that money. But at this stage, everyone is against white monopoly capital, but and it's inclusive of all the white people, which is not supposed to be. It's considered that there's approximately 400,000 white people in South Africa considered to be poor in terms of United Nations standards.
Okay.
It's much more than it was during 1994.
I think as you're talking right now, I can see some of the audience members about Sheikha Makanda. I don't know whether they believe what you're saying right now.
I also wanted to come in. Sorry, man. Look, it's true. The vast majority of white people aren't rich, but they certainly well off. The average white household earns 8 times more than the average black household, where there's 2 incomes, and the average black household only has 1 income, little to nothing. Sometimes they depend on a social welfare grant. 1 in 3 black South Africans are unemployed. If you can count 3 people here, 1 of them is unemployed. 1 in only 20 white people are unemployed. That's a vast difference, right? So white people still have it nice, super nice. You may not be rich, but you have a car, you have a house, your bond is is well paid. You can send your kids to school. You can probably go on a holiday twice a year, maybe once a year if you go to Hermanus twice. You know, but that's the reality of white living in this country.
Nicolette was saying something good, even the struggle as well. A poor black man and a poor white man are funny. In fact, you would like to be a poor white man if and
I think the thing is that fact that, you know, they might not have the money in their bank account, but they benefit from just that whiteness, and we can't run away from that. But ALFRED, let's bring in you a little bit and tell us some of the work that you guys have done up until now in terms of addressing these economic crimes, and what was the reason to even open up that door?
Well, as you're correctly pointing out, apartheid was a crime against humanity. That is the beginning of it all. And then during that process, there were a lot of economic crimes. And what we're looking at is the collaboration that the business has made, that the government was pushing. Today we're talking of a state capture. There's also a very interesting issue of an arms deal. Apartheid was very terrible. When we came to power as black people, that one we must admit, we knew all these things. It was very clear that black people are suppressed, black people are poor. There was a law in this country. White were not just preferring themselves. It was through legislated laws which was enforced by the system, and I was there because, you know, you see me, I was there all the time, and I know what was happening. The 1976 issue didn't just come just about that. So there was a very big injustices that was committed. Now that when we look at it now, we are saying, however, the democratic government then had a duty to make sure that those things were addressed. Even the Truth Commission, I wanted to go to that because the tribunal, you can take it within that kind of perspective.
Yeah.
They sat down and looked at this issue. A lot of it were revealed. You know, the defense kind of a system under the apartheid, forcing themselves in there, the Nationalist Party, the way it was governing. So we came to the table and talked to them through the CODESA and all that. Yeah. But we're not supposed to talk out the rights to resume what was initially supposed to have been a shared thing for the black people. So now this is why we are crying out like that. It's not about the white people, how they live and all that. It's about the system that we brought in. How was it possible for it to take us through? Because the black people cannot go and just take the houses on that.
Of course
it didn't work even in Zimbabwe where it was tried at some point. But you needed a system. Those negotiations were supposed to tell the mining sector to say, look, there's a fair share for the black people. These are the majority. These are legitimately the owners of the birthright that Comrade Nelson Mandela used to talk about. There was never any follow-up to that. Then we discovered that in actual fact, when we came to power as a black government, that was led by the African National Congress, we became now held in what we call today a state capture. But if you go to the arms deal, this is where you take notice of the fact that things went very well. The international community that made everybody to lie on their eyes thinking that they are supporting, because the UN was clear with a declaration since 1948 that apartheid is a crime. But the international community, the states, your France, your Belgium, the banks there were trading with the apartheid system, that they were making it to be vital. Now those arms which were bought there were bought to go to Soweto and kill us. They were bought to make sure that we don't move as black people. So there's a big crime there. And then I was looking at the tribunal sitting there, our Justice Zach Yakub sitting there listening, and you could see the sadness when the witnesses were coming in. But who gets implicated? It's black people again. Those who are leading us in the government. Those who had all the power, the legislation. We gave ANC at some point the 2/3 majority to work out things. They never brought anything back.
All right, let's come back in there. With Mr. De Beer, talking about some of these companies currently today in 2018 are still trading. They are monopolies in some of their, they are manipulating what gets put out into South Africans, you know, press, media. They colluding the rand. They're managing to get the rand colluded forex. How do we deal with that right now? Do we say to them, we need money for free education. You guys have stolen our money. Come back and pay for these children's education.
My honest view is that it's time for white people to come to the party and say, you know what, let us throw those people to the wolves. Let the white people come out and say, you know what, for 24 years, basically not much have happened for redistribution of wealth. Let us just go and take those individuals that we really know about, which are constantly in the media, go and throw them to the wolves. It's time that we need to be part of this building process. When it comes to crime, I know that many white people will crucify me for saying this, but the fact of the matter is that most, if not all, of these crime networks and syndicates are run by white people. Sure. It's not black people. And now,
let's bring Oliver on this one, because we're talking about this. I want to find out from you. We know good companies that benefited a lot of money through the apartheid government, and then now it seems as if we are saying they must pay it back if they want to, or should we force these companies to pay this money back?
This is what I would say, and you guys don't want me to mention names, but I've got a couple of ideas. Yeah. One, if there's an inquiry into this and we find out that your company exists today as a direct benefit of apartheid crimes, one, the state should just take your company, or at least a percentage thereof, and have ownership in it as the state, right? Because it doesn't help we kick these companies out. The current state. Right, the current government. It doesn't help we kick these companies out, guys. And look, Steinhoff, we know it's very popular. If we're going to employ, if we're going to kick Steinhoff out, we really are going to lose jobs. So we don't want to lose the jobs. We want to keep them, but actually make it a reparation project. So what do? You give a percentage of the company to the state. The state has ownership in the continuation of those companies, right? In that way, money is coming back. We know money is not going into offshore accounts. We know that money is going towards building roads. We know money is going towards education and all of those sort of things. But importantly, we also know that those companies are going to treat the workers fairly. Women are going to start earning as much as men. Black people aren't going to earn less than their white counterparts. And we think that's the important part that needs to happen there.
Okay, because of this cut, breaking must be a breaking apartheid money is or should we even romanticize this issue?
Welcome back to Daily Thetha. But also we're looking at the legacies that the apartheid system and that looting and the economic crimes have left in this country. We're not just a landless kind of citizenry, but there's so much more. There's black tax. There are so many issues. But on the couch, we are joined by Uputis Ngabo, who is a social activist, and Dr. Patrick Bond, who is a professor of political economy at Wits University. Guys, welcome to the couch.
Thank you.
Dr. Patrick, I think we'll jump straight into the conversation because we've spoken about, we've already mentioned that you worked in the office of former President Nelson Mandela. But can you tell us a little bit about the conversations that you might have had with him at that time, looking right now at some of the inequality that has come out of the apartheid regime?
Well, two things strike out, because you remember perhaps hearing that when he got out of jail, just at that very month, he said that the Freedom Charter, which called for a nationalization, for the sharing of the mines, banks, monopoly capital, was vital to the ANC project, and he had to surrender that. In fact, he went to Davos, Switzerland, the World Economic Forum in '92. He came back. Then comes '93. He signs deals with the International Monetary Fund. Even before coming into power, agrees that the $25 billion apartheid debt should be repaid. Many of us said, no, that should be cancelled, defaulted. It was an illegitimate, odious debt. And then, most tragically, in my view, especially because yesterday's budget amplifies this, it was to liberalize exchange control. So it's right that Reynolds was saying, the rich whites not only kept their wealth, there was no wealth tax in spite of some strong lobbying, but then they could take it away and take it away forever and use tax havens. Even our president uses tax havens, Mauritius, Bermuda, to take money from Lonmin, MTN. These are big companies that are being prosecuted, or Standard Bank that he was on the board of, currency manipulation. And it's such a tragedy that even yesterday, with all the concern we have about worsening inequality, worsening poverty, worsening unemployment, that funding is still leaving. 5% more was allowed yesterday. It's about 500 billion rand. We've got to find some ways to stop it and tighten, not loosen exchange controls.
Sure. Let me quickly come into Snabo Ngizogwena. From umuntu omusha njengamanje ohlele ekhaya and thinking ukuthi I don't want to talk about apartheid because I'm young and it didn't affect me that much because akazange ngibona lokho kuhlukumezeka. If let's go back, legacy apartheid isihlukumeze kanjani esimeni esiphila kuso namhlanje ngo-2018?
Mr. Dubier said something very, very crucial in that apartheid is still alive and well to this day. And much as we try to sway away from its presence in our current society or discourse, its manifestation, it's still alive. You can see it, in the forms of spatial planning, our healthcare system, and so forth and so forth. So, for us not to talk about it, it is spectacularly disingenuous in every respect, because you're trying to say, no man, it happened, let's move on, let's forget. But we cannot be sugarcoating things. You cannot be putting makeup on a broken system. It ought to be dealt with head on, and which is what we need to do as young people. Much as abantu abadala try to sort of keep us out of the conversation, but now's the time, as umuntu omncane ukuthi uphakame uthi, you know what, it's my time, it's my future. At the end of the day, those old people are going to be gone, and then when are you going to be stuck with what they brought up you with? the apartheid's legacy, much as we don't like to talk about it, it is alive and well. And the saddest thing, though, as Peter said, Uti, the powers that be have no appetite to deal with it. Case in point, the budget. Case in point, I mean, if you look at all the metros itself, there is no appetite at all to deal with things as they are. I mean, it's like the status quo is being maintained by the people who supposedly liberated us.
You know, lento esho Nicolette yangikhumbuza ukuthi masibuka kakhulu ithina abantu abaningi esingasebenzi, thina abantu abaningi esingenama business, ithina abantu abaningi esingakwazi ukuthi trade kwi space because we cannot afford. I think enye ama legacies esibhekene nawo njenganamhlanje.
And then in the budget we raise VAT. I mean, it's very confusing.
It's untenable thinking, Uti. I mean, VAT has not been raised since I think 1996, 1993, and now all of a sudden, because we've been looting left, right, and center, we increase the VAT. Fact of the matter is, it might not affect the middle class as much, but it's the poorest of the poorest, so we're going to feel it the hardest. I mean, you go out there and you put a lesuti, these are VAT-free foods, but fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, you still need to be eating a balanced diet, and that list alone is not sufficient. I mean, it's just disingenuous in every sense of the word.
Thetha Chabalala, we heard our President Cyril Ramaphosa at this man who is sitting landless at 70 years old. He has moved from District 6, he's sitting landless. And we understand these are the direct legacies that the apartheid system has left with us, especially the apartheid system with economic crimes. But what have you guys also uncovered with the tribunals that you guys have done in terms of the legacy, the things that affect me and everyone every single day?
Well, the truth of the matter is, as continually is being said, the system that we are in didn't move a thing from the apartheid. All what we did was to replace the rules. During apartheid, we took the stones. And because we knew who the oppressor was, we throw it. That's why the song Chikitshela Ngamatshe, it was not a joke. So it was known that we were fighting. There were forced removals and everything, but we were fighting because we knew that the white apartheid system is upon us. There comes a democracy. A democracy that says to you, there will be a reconstruction and development program. You have to ask yourself, what does this RTP means? We didn't talk about these 4 match box houses that we are referring to all the time when you're talking of. We were talking about the real program that was to reconstruct. The program that was going to say, we left things here because we want to move here. When Nelson Mandela came out of prisons, this country was banning since from 1976 until 1986, when now they had to, P.W. Botha had to accept. Of course he did not, but Big Botha recognized to say there must be a black president at some point. So that was a way of forcing apartheid to recognize the things. So when we went to the apartheid, then we have that case study that you are talking about. We have people here, somebody was saying from the audience, we have people who are living on the streets. When we came in, and so it means that our system didn't work. Our people are also lacking knowledge. Our people are also lacking knowledge of their power. The Right to Know now is running a campaign, it's called Access to Information. There are a lot of things, even here in the city of Johannesburg, wherein the ownership of these places where the men of 70 years should have been accommodated is owned by people sometimes who are not even from this country. I'm not being xenophobic here. I'm trying to say to you, we are not even in control of systems. Everything is left to it. Why? Because people have to acknowledge the democratic power that is in there. So the whole project is messed up because if you don't apply the power, you are obviously suppressing your people. You are looting, you are taking, this point is very critical, that these comrades have stolen. We must take this, so the idea of the tribunal, the civil society was saying, let's look at what is happening now to hinder the real objective of uncovering those things and dealing away with apartheid system.
You know, Kini, you know what hurts me from listening to TSHABALALA is the fact that we were sitting and talking about, we don't even know who owns the Reserve Bank, the central bank of the country.
And the sad part is that we're having a conversation in Jangalena 24 years later. I don't think conversation maybe going forward and to a next segment as well. So how do we move forward from this situation as Pegane Nigeria in Africa? As I say breaking say buya with analysts more good. How do we move forward?
You are still watching Daily Thetha. Now that we know what we know about these economic crimes, what now? And I think that's a question that we can ask our audience, Kini. What now?
And the audience as well, into they have more questions. My brother, you want to ask Mr. DBS question. What is your question to Yen?
Yeah, Dumela, my name is Franz. I just want to ask Dr. B that why are still, it's like black people are saying it. It's like
relax. Ask that question nicely. Yeah, chill.
Okay. It's like I just want to ask the doctor that why still black people are staying at the scholar camp at this time of democracy?
Why black people are still staying in Masquerade camp, Guile democracy after 24 years?
Yes, after 24
That's
years.
a question to you, DBS.
Can we pass the mic to him? Thank you.
If I knew that answer, I don't think that we would have had this conversation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, wealth was not distributed as it should have. And now we've got the EFF and BLF and all these radical political parties who wants drastic and radical economic change, and partly I can't blame them really, but is it? It's definitely with a new incoming with a new president. Yeah. It's something that we as a nation should build again. Right. We should go back to the old Rainbow Nation and start from there as we should.
Okay, quick one. Last one, Tabang. Your question as well?
It's actually Tabang.
Tabang, yes.
Yeah. I have a question for you. Later on, you said that white people are not given an organization. Actually, there's no organization for white people to give back to the black people who are living in townships. But my point is that you actually don't need an organization to give back. You just need to take your money and build actually a house or give something to black people. There's no organization needed for you guys to give back to the black people which are feeling oppressed, you see. And another thing is that there's actually a lack of information for black people about apartheid. Like last year was actually my first time I heard about state capture. I never knew that word. And I actually know more about the European history, unlike South African history. But the information is kept from us black children at black schools, you see. So I don't know, like, my main point is that you don't need an organization to give back to the black people. You just need to take your money and build a house for a black person.
That's definitely a valid argument. Let me quickly use an example. A couple of years ago, government, the Department of Justice built the magistrates court in just outside Alberton in the township. But unfortunately, that was a great opportunity, for instance, to also develop the area, the houses, for instance, and encourage the white workers who's working there to come and stay there. And those basic things aren't implemented today.
I actually almost feel sorry for you, Mr. De Beer, because you have to answer all these questions that we've got. But let's come back to Mr. Kamoto. The likes of the EFF coming out with radical, pushing. Yes, maybe some of the things that they're pushing for we might not agree with, but is maybe the EFF a little too late? Should we have had a political party like the EFF in 1994 when we had an opportunity to change the legislation and policies to be able to get back the money?
Look, I think to say that what the EFF is coming with is a little too late is a bit drastic, because the issues that they are challenging against are issues that have been there ever since the dawn of democracy or whatnot. So I think the one important thing for us to remember is that when the ANC came into power in 1994, they focused largely on political freedom and putting a black face in government, as opposed to other functions of the state, such as the economy, that are actually funding apartheid. So when the ANC came into power, it was said that they were supposed to implement the clauses of the Freedom Charter, some of which state that the land must be owned by the people. But for whatever reason, as Untate said earlier on, that too many concessions were made at Kadesa. People focused on just putting a black face in government, and then they forgot about everything else, which is why you find that we are rotating black presidents in parliament. We are changing them one to the other, but the economy still rests in the hands of the minority. And these are issues that we need to be addressing. So the likes of your economic freedom fighters, the BLF, they are coming at a time where everybody, the majority of the country, is saying, when are we switching hands of the economy? When are we getting the land back in the hands of the majority?
Sure. And Oliver, a quick one, because it's Kataseko as well. I want to find out, Tuguti, how do we move and not have this conversation again and again, but actioning Abonagan?
Look, I'm unconvinced at this moment that the EFF and BLF have the right answers, but they're certainly asking the right questions. You know, we can talk about land restitution, land reclamation project, and we can talk about at length what it means to the dignity of black people. But we speak about it as though it's an economic project that will sustain us. We live in an economic system globally that's focused on technology and tech. Data is incredibly expensive in this country. You can't even study in the comfort of your home without having to be in a university campus, for instance, correspondence studying. You can't even participate in that. You can't even build a business today that relies on the internet because it's not accessible to black people in South Africa today. So we talk about archaic economic models and not thinking far ahead of Silicon Valley. We're not thinking at the rate that the whole world is thinking at. We're not thinking further than that. We're also not thinking about the economy as an ownership of all of us. We're thinking the economy as a participation project.
Because of this TSHABALALA nje, quick one, impilo zabantu since 94, especially abamnyama, zishintshile yini or sisaphila esimene besifana naso before 94?
The communities must take back that power. We need to protest. We need to say to the President Ramaphosa, because he knows what we are saying, it's not enough for you to tell us to pay more VAT because you don't have money. What we need to do is to go to the project of real empowerment. We need to take people back to those. We need to go to the townships there and say, what can we do to improve the people's economy? The resolution that says the land must come back to the people must be realized. Because we're all wondering, where's PAC? It used to talk this language. The ANC was murmuring about it. Now that they've come to that resolution, we must go down to it and work it out.
Thank you very much for tuning in. We'll see you guys next week, Monday.